I'd like to call the special board meeting of RSU 74 Board of Directors, the second one, August 12, 2020 at Carolina High School. To order, would you please stand for the national Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Thank you everyone for being here. We have a motion to
Motion to waive the limitation of public participation to allow the community to presidential this board prior to the board's vote.
Do we have a second? Judy seconded. All in favor? Anyone opposed? No? Yes.
Well, so the same as the last meeting, if they have questions within our discussion, they should be allowed to ask. No, prior to the vote, is that? Okay, thank you.
Not after we're done. Okay. Got it. All right, the agenda item is to see if the board will approve the back-to-school plan. Does everyone, yes? Thank you. Okay, any discussion? Here we go. Does everyone have a copy of this in the audience? If you don't, there are some on that table over there. Okay, Mr. Grace?
All right, good evening, everyone. I just want to thank the public, the board. I've been a superintendent for about 7 or 8 years this year. And I've never gone through a pandemic. And so I am learning on the fly on how to respond to this. And I haven't done everything right. I hope I don't get everything wrong, but I haven't done everything right. And I just thank you for your patience. And I hope the public and the staff and the students are hearing that we really want to be responsive and deploy a plan that's best suited for the community. So that's where we're at. I am going to only go over the changes for the board since I deployed the first iteration of this to you last week. So for the board, it's the items in red and blue that I will point out to you this evening. I will stop at each interchange to field questions, i.e. when we talk about symptom screening and training. Okay? So, we have a plan. The plan has to meet the 6 requirements for in-person instruction. We're going to talk about second to that and a hybrid model. And third, we're going to talk about the remote option, remote learning option. That's what we're going to cover today. In the first paragraph, we changed guidelines to requirements because they are requirements. They're not Mr. Tracy's rules or the administrative team's rules or even the board's rules. There are 6 non-negotiables to come back to school. There are 2 phrases in red. I'm going to read those because I need to read them. This plan is subject to change at any time based on Maine CDC and DOE guidance, which again is quite fluid and tells you that it's flexible. It needs to be. Second to that, the following mandates must be understood and adhered to in order to be part of in-person instruction. The administrative team met a couple of times this week and last week and this week, and are working on sort of putting a little more meat to the bone on this, on how we think we might do this. I hope to be able to answer your questions today. So, the first thing, symptom screening. There are no changes since last week, except staff will check temperatures of every student entering the building. The plan would be that we'd have a staff member at the door with a thermometer for the forehead. I just talked to a superintendent friend today, and I love their model even better. They bought like a metal detector. That's the biggest what I'm thinking it looks like. Thermal imaging scanner, and they bought one for every school. And bigger schools, they bought 2. They're about $2,000 a piece. they don't have to, there would be a staff member near there, but the person, including the superintendent, would walk through that every morning. So that would take the whole idea of staff and students, we would all go through that same process to do what we think we're saying we want to do here, but it also takes the staffing and any judgment right out of the picture. So with your permission, or without your permission, I'm still going to go look into that model if that's what everybody thinks is a good idea. It was a great idea today, about 2 hours ago. So, with your permission, I think, is that okay? In the meantime, we would staff it with a staff member per month if you can't get those in the next 2 weeks. And then the plan would be if someone pings a 100.4 or greater or looks symptomatic in some way, they would be escorted to the isolation room where we would put them, we would set their backpack down, we would get them a drink of water, and we would do what we typically would do with all students, is give them a rest period because they get hot from being on the bus, and we would scan them a second time. Further symptoms per the CDC guidelines would be performed, including a second temperature check, and staff will perform pre-symptom screenings daily. So those are the major changes, as you can see in the plan. Questions on symptom screening?
Ellen?
What is the protocol going to be for the staff pre-symptom screening?
That we would issue the guidance to them, and currently we would have them self-administer the pre-screening and then report to us if they need, if they have to say no because they've got a temperature or have a symptom and they need to, they would report that to us if it happens in the building.
Are they going to do that with like a computer kind of thing where they would check it on?
We have not scheduled for a mechanism or an app to account for that yet. And there are a number of districts doing it as I'm explaining, and there are other districts doing it with a log, a written log, or an app, or even that thermal scanner idea, which again I think is a great one. So that is what we have for the plan right now.
Now, Bobby?
So if you're doing a thermal scanner, that would be in your plan, that you will do temperature checks by that mechanism after you receive it.
No, what I'm asking the board to approve
It's temperature checks, but I think we need to be more specific.
well, and I told you I heard the information an hour ago.
Yeah.
So,
So if that's what you want to do, we think that that is a good idea, and we as a board think that that's a good idea, and we authorize you to purchase them, then that would be in the plan. We are purchasing thermal as soon as they come. That is how we will do temperature checks. Until that time, we would do temperature checks by forehead scan. I think that there needs to be more specific information for parents. How are you taking our kids' temperature? So put that in there. If that's what we're going to do, then that needs to be in our plan. And if it's not what we're going to do, then it shouldn't be in there. But
thank you for your comment.
Jerry, I don't want to get all wonky, but I've read some reports on the big gun type of thermometer and put it in kids' heads, and I don't think that's a good idea. I think it's, and again, I don't want to get all weird, wonky, and warm and fuzzy, but I think that does some funky things to the kids. So I think the thermal imaging scanner is a great idea, and I think the sooner the better, so we're not pointing a gun at kids' heads.
Son.
The ones that I've seen,
Yes.
how do we change this plan? How do we add or remove things specifically that we want to see in this plan prior to the vote? What's the process?
Motion to amend, change what we're changing the plan as we go before we vote on it.
On every subsection?
Well, that looks like what it would be, yeah.
So do we need to amend the motion so that we approve every subsection in itself?
Mr. Chairman.
But how do we know if we all
Hang on,
agree
hang
on it?
on.
Can we do a straw vote on each section? A binding straw vote on each section, so you don't need a motion and the whole protocol. You can simply a straw vote on what to accept or reject as we're going along. And then, if the majority want it, then it gets inserted and then we vote on it collectively. Does that make any sense?
It makes more sense than trying to vote on it in its entirety and try and make any edits that the board feels we need to do.
That, yes, we did not, disagree.
What if you make a change like that to this plan and they don't come in time when we start school?
So if we're gonna start, I would feel that if we're gonna start, we're probably gonna start with the temperature,
Forehead,
yeah.
one,
And then one, okay, one, thank you. And when we got those, we would use those, because if that's the case, they might not be up for 6 weeks. I don't know, so that's something that the board would have to decide on that. Yeah,
Me. So, but that would be PPE gear, not coming in, I mean, all of these things in this plan would be contingent on if we got the supplies that we needed to open school that are in this plan. So yes, if we have temperature checks, wands, then, and we already have them, then that would be in the plan prior to the thermal scans, but that's what I'm saying, is there needs to be
So-
specific.
may I respond?
Please.
Mr. Chair? I'm not asking, I want to be clear on this. I'm not asking for that level of detail or input on this plan. I need the board's approval for me, the superintendent, authorize my staff to do symptom check when the students and staff arrive in schools. I would certainly, and I'm telling you that I'm going to look into the best way to do that. Right now, as of 2 hours ago, I believe if the thermal imaging scanners are the way to go, then that we will deploy that. I'm not asking the board for that level of detail for me to be able to open school. I want you to understand this is what we're going to do. Me and my team have exhausted our best ways, best methodology to get staff and students in here safely, and deploy as much possible communication out to moms and dads in the process. But that's what I'm looking for. So I'd be happy to make any amendments the board wants, but that's what I'm looking for here. And I am going to look into those thermal imaging scanners as soon as we possibly can.
Yeah.
Because it's going to change, that I didn't notice every week that change. So what happens this week, will be different next week. So I think we should just get to the end of nitpicking every week.
Larry?
So, I think I'm a little uncomfortable with a carte blanche, and I know you don't want to be here all night, and I don't either, but we got one chance to do this. And I think, and we've had this discussion, I think we need to know what the key indicators are. I think we need to know how things are going to be measured. I think we need to know a lot more detail than, yeah, we're kind of going to look into, and I'm not being disrespectful, but, yeah, we're kind of going to look into things, and I'm going to do the best I can. I think we need a certain level, I need a certain level of detail in order to support an opening plan. I need to know what the plan is.
Bobby?
I agree, and I think that it's not just the board that needs or should have more detail on the plan, but I think that parents and staff should have more details as well. I mean, I don't know how many times to say it, but
Ellen?
Perhaps we could make a list of edits that we want to specify things, and then as we go through this, we could then make that, Robert can do whatever he wants. Say, we want to authorize the superintendent to purchase these thermal imaging units in order to take temperature. And that will be put into use as soon as feasible. But I think we do want to know specific things. I'm sure there's going to be other things coming down the line. I agree with Larry about things that need to be done. And so I wonder if we have a list of the possible things we want to do. And then before we vote on the whole thing, we can come and say, we can look at these individual items and say, up or down, how do we want to go with this? Is that possible? Is that okay?
And then I would, before the board approves. So what I'm suggesting is that someone makes a motion to make an edit, Mrs. Harrington is, and if that's seconded and supported, I'll note that edit. And we'll keep going through the plan, and before the board votes on the whole plan as a whole, I will read off those edits per section, and you can then decide if you want them all in there or not. With edits. So we'll be approving the board. No, we can do it tonight.
Okay.
Yeah. I'll make a motion to edit to add the means and whatever that is, the means in which we are taking the temperature in order to student.
So,
By which? Means by which? Okay.
Judy, Mrs. Duffy made a motion to approve the back-to-school plan.
Yeah.
So she could retract her motion. So would you, and Bob seconded, so if we get, would you retract your motion? And then someone second that, okay. And then it could be now a motion to permit with edits.
To add how the temperature will be taken. Of everything.
Can you do based on edits? And that will allow you to-
Yeah, so based on it.
First, so the motion is to allow for the school board to approve the back-to-school plan with edits.
Wait, are you allowed to see this item?
Just a minute, Fred.
Okay. So I need a second.
Discussion?
I'm curious, I'm really curious about what level of detail the board is comfortable with collectively. I haven't had to use, I don't know what I can understand. And I'm just curious what the pulse of the board is. Do they want a lot more detail than we have? Are they comfortable sort of approving a carte blanche plan and letting the superintendent implement it? I don't know what kind of control the board's interested in. And I'm pretty flexible on any of it. I'm not comfortable with it.
Aaron?
From user experience, the biggest disservice that we can do is to micromanage. We have some people that pay very, very well in jobs, and other people, they've got our kids' best interest in mind. I'm all for having a lot more detail, but I don't want us to push down to that point where we're micromanaging, that we're just wasting everybody's time.
Mr. Chairman, I'd be interested to know what that point is, because in my opinion, the worst disservice we can do is to overburden the staff, have a program that doesn't have key indicators for success, and the biggest failure is we're going to fail these kids. They're going to end up with a less than acceptable education. And if it fails and we go back and reevaluate in November, it's December before we implement. We find out it didn't work so well January, February, now we're back in March, and we're looking at a year. And that's the worst case scenario. but I like indicators. I like to know, I like to have somebody report, this is what we're doing, this is where we are, this is our next step. But, and is that too detailed, Mr. Chair? Is that too detailed, for Darren?
Well, yes, I think it is.
Okay.
That's my opinion. And I don't know if I know you're asking questions that wants to be there. Folks on the board, I think, maybe in the public, are a little more comfortable with more detail, and there are some that are like, let's jump in the pool. So we're trying to work to build a plan that sort of captures both of those things. What I need to know, I thought we were reflecting last week. We came to you, the school nurse who works with the MDOE's state nurse for schools has said, we're not going to take temperatures in schools. That's not the recommendation. And yet we heard you. And we said locally, that's something that's important to us. So we put it in the plan. And now what I need to know is that we're going to take temperatures of all students when they come into the door. And how we do that is really up to me and my team. We're going to do that as least intrusive, as most private, as the best way we can. And I know me saying to you, I've heard you say it, me telling you I'm going to do the best I can, isn't good enough for you. So I'm not sure I'm going to be able to please you with what plan I come up with. What I'm telling you
I'm not
is,
talking just about thermal imaging or temperatures. I'm talking about the implementing of the remote learning, the implementing of how things are going to function in the classroom. How do we measure success?
so what I'm trying to do is answer your question, sir, on symptom screening.
Okay, all right.
So,
All right.
have I done that? And so the measurement is what are we going to do? I said we're going to symptom screen. How are we going to do it? We're going to do it at the door with thermometers. And I'm going to look and research into the best thermometer.
Okay, I'm jumping ahead.
Okay? And then we're going to go from there. All right, so that's the plan for that.
There are a few questions that I will get to, but I need to look at the board and ask if we need to be so detailed as to say, this is how we're going to do it. I mean, and because there will be consequences when you adopt something if it's not done that way. You might not have school. Okay, those are the things. You can't put something into place that we can't adhere to every way there. So if we want to get thermal imaging and we can't get them for 6 weeks, and we want to push school out for 6 weeks so we have them, okay, we use the temperature, the thermometer wand until they get here. And this is where I'm finding us that we're where we're at. Because if we say we're going to do it this way, that's how we're going to have to do it, because that's what we're putting out there. If we say that we're going to check the temperature, so I need a little feedback on that before I move forward in the meeting. Yes, Bob?
I think we're trying too hard to micromanage. We pay the superintendent good money, we pay the staff good money, we move forward with the staff, including the teachers, everybody else. We hire them to run a district in the best interest of a student in the district. I think we need to understand that this is what he's going to do, how he does it, the staff. If there's an issue, then come back to us. Until then, we have to trust somebody, somehow. I think that's where the superintendent will
Thank you. All right, so I got 3 questions to me. Danica was first, and then Val, and then Grace. So go ahead, Danica, please.
I also feel like we're splitting hairs. If we have the temperature will be taken. I'm not a proponent of taking the temperature anyway, but we put it in the plan. I don't care whether it's done with a forehead wand or if it's done with thermal imaging. I think, honestly, wasting money on the thermal imaging machine, but I don't really think we're taking temperatures anyway because it's a moot point, is a little ridiculous, but I think that we're splitting hairs here on how we're going to check on
Okay.
temperatures.
Thank you. Val?
I agree with them. I have trust and I have faith in the school district and the staff. that they do temperatures and they do whatever they need to do to keep the children safe. You have to think your house is really here, and tell them that, I want this, we're doing it, but it's not our job.
Can you guys just speak just or something, like, nobody can hear you. Sorry, but. Sorry about that, we'll speak up.
Go to Mike.
You guys got a mic right there, can we pass it around or something?
No, that's not the most advisable thing.
I get it, all right.
I mean, what we're trying to do.
Project your voice out, everyone can hear.
Okay, sorry, we did not have a volume problem last week. Staff, please be loud. Your outdoor voice is inside, please. Grace.
Last week, Mr. Tracy, I had asked if we were going to vote on these temperature checks. Because the nurse had even stated, like 4 days before they even get a temperature. So I don't see the purpose. And I thought you said we were going to vote on it, but you just said that you heard us and you put it down.
Yes, so it's in the plan, you could move to take it out.
Okay, but how did it get in the first place? That's what I'm asking.
What I gleaned last week was that sort of and I didn't hear from every board member, but it felt like, I think that's terrible, it seemed as though the preponderance of information I got was, let's add a temperature check-in at the door. It seemed to be a reasonable response. It is something, the schools that are doing it, it is a tangible way. It is one of the, it's one thing you can point to and say, it's 100.4. It's a measurable indicator of COVID-19, so that would be why we would say that's one symptom we can easily look for. That's why it's in the plan. I think it does put a degree of comfort. Maybe it's false comfort. I don't know that, but a degree of comfort for folks as something we're doing.
Laura?
So can we just take a vote to vote on the screening and that we're on right now and move forward and just, I make a motion to pass it forward to as it's written for this section.
Well, right now we're doing edits, so we go to the next section.
Then, I don't know how we're going to decide if we're going to edit it or not, but we need to move on to the next.
Ellen?
Well, I want Sherry. I agree. I think we're spending more time on this because the state has given us guidelines as what has to be done. I would like to get on to the actual plan for hybrid and remote learning, which we have spent less time on. I think that is important, and I think we do need to have some input into that. I'm concerned more about the new protocols and the parents' responsibility for that, because I thought we suggested they would have to sign off that they knew the protocols and were going to conform to them if their children were coming back to school.
That is already part of the registration to come back to school, and
Okay.
Mr. Hall and I reviewed it today.
I'm good on that then.
And so those are
But I
all
wish
to
we could,
register for school.
Let's either make a decision one way or another about the temperature and move on to the other section.
So, we're gonna move on to the next section. Does anybody want any more to talk about? Evan, are you? Let's move on, okay? Is everyone good with moving on? Parents?
How about if you put the temperature will be taken and it can be one way or the other if you're gonna put it in there at all, because if one machine breaks, you need a backup. And you can't say, oh, well, we can't take it because this one broke. Well, you didn't tell me that. Somebody's gonna do it. So it's just gonna be taken one way or another, period.
That's what we have.
Yeah, and that's how it is written now. Thank you. Is anyone else? Okay, thank you. Let's move on.
Okay, physical distancing, second bullet down, requirements for specific content such as PE and music will be developed in compliance with CDC requirements as they become available. Lockers and cubbies, that's a fourth or fifth bullet down, lockers and cubbies at K-8 will be assigned by homeroom. The most recent intel on that is as long as students and staff remain within cohort groups, things like, the larger cubbies can be used. The reason, like at the high school, or even in the high school where they would be off limits, is because they're congregating. They attract congregation. So the lockers at the high school will be off limits. No other changes in physical social distancing. Question?
Yeah, Danica has one, thank
I
you.
do. The requirements for physical education and music. So the Maine DOE has put out the pre-K through adult education public health guidance.
Yes.
And so it does say to avoid group singing. And it also says to limit physical education and extracurricular sports and activities that do not involve close contact. So are we just trying to develop these guidances for social distancing?
First of all, thank you for reading that guidance, because it's long and it has been ever changing. But that's the same guidance we've been looking at. 2 weeks ago, there was, you could participate in these things as long as you were social distancing outside. The close contact piece has remained intact. Now, and then the indoor physical ed, as long as they were 6 feet apart, was advisable without masks. But now the recent guidance is they would be participating in PE with masks. So, because that's ever changing, we're going to be working very closely with staff and these guidelines to develop. It might be to start off the year doing a lot of health education, fortunately or unfortunately, and figuring out. And I know our new district music teacher is working on equipment and supplies that will allow her to be able to do some, whether face covering that will allow distance chorus, for example. So we are working on that program. Thank you.
Ellen, did you have a question? I have it written down.
Well, that wasn't singing. I would just like, rather than going through micromanaging this is what you've got in mind. I would like at our board meeting, the regular board meeting, to get responses, data updates on what worked and what didn't. That's what I want to know. What's happened when you've used, what are these things, where's working, where are you having trouble? And I don't want data from last spring, but this is important. I want to know whether this is working, whether we need to change it. I don't want to micromanage it, but I can't do any sort of oversight or sign off on anything unless I know what you're doing and how that is actually working.
Okay, thank you, and I think as a board, we may have to be,
I think we'll have to have special meetings.
we're going to have special meetings to be updated, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Yes, you had a question, please?
I'm new to the district last year, so that's why I'm just asking this, and they didn't have it last year. But does the district have musical instruments that these children can play, and or some of the kids have them at home, and, excuse me, instead of singing where they're out, they could be blowing into their horn, their flute, their clarinet, their recorder that costs $5. That's another music outlet for some kids. That is a very important part of their education.
It absolutely is, and I probably should have started this with, none of this plan, in my mind, is best case education. We're all the educators in the room are thinking like, how am I going to do the very best I can within all these stringent guidelines? And so my answer is, we do have some instruments, but again, there's pretty stringent guidelines around what we can allow, like no wind blowing instruments, for example. That's against the protocol right now. So I know the admin team and those that oversee the music department will be working on that. Anything else on physical distancing, sir?
Thank you. I'd like to suggest that whatever protocols we use, whether it's the MPAs, or we come up with something either more stringent or less stringent, whatever protocols we're using with our sports teams and with willpower would also be the same protocols that we would use in our PE classes. Level of consistency.
Okay, noted, thank you. Are there any other questions on?
Next part of the,
Wait a minute, I have a Jack.
No, go ahead, Larry, thank you.
May I address it directly?
Certainly.
Jack, can you go into just a little bit of detail on that for me? So you're talking the same, if they can play soccer, it's a sports program, you use the same criteria in your phys ed?
Correct. Whatever protocols we use in those other programs, we should be able to use it in the education program too.
So is
Whatever
that,
distancing or mask, whatever they need to apply, whatever they're mandatory.
but are masks mandatory for soccer, for example?
Not all the time, no.
But it says-
phase 1 through 4, so, no.
What about in phys ed? Is it mandatory in all the phys ed program that you wear a mask?
Inside, yes. Outside, no. As long as the other physical distancing and other protocols are being applied.
Outside. You have right up, or what'd you say?
Still have to maintain social distance outside.
Yes, sir.
So, how do you play soccer without wearing a face mask?
Excuse me?
How do you play soccer and not have contact?
That's it's a great question. We're
If that question is directed to me, I'd like to address it.
I'll just ask the question, go ahead.
I don't plan on doing soccer this fall. I don't plan on doing contact sports. I've already provided the administration, we had a meeting 2 weeks ago with the activities that would be appropriate. Would be Tabata, weight training, of course with no spotting, with social distancing, archery.
Without spotting.
Huh?
How do you do weight training?
You can do weight training without spotting,
Somebody
with
gets tired
appropriate
of
weight.
watching, it's this school district. A lot of them.
Excuse me?
If somebody not spotting, and they get better lifting.
With appropriate weights, they can lift weights without a spot. And there are different lifts you can do that don't need a spotter. You don't need a spotter to do curls. You don't need a spotter to do crossovers on a crossover. You don't need a spotter to do exercise. Archery, badminton, tennis, things that do a lot for social distancing. Cross-country biking, we have our bikes. So those are things when winter comes. This thing, it hasn't changed a whole lot. Cross-country skiing, of course, it's going to have to be timed so we can sterilize equipment, any equipment that would be shared. Got to be appropriate time for that. Those are sort of activities, lifetime activities, are where we're going to go. Does that answer your question? Thank you.
So just so I'm clear, during low power, they will be required to wear masks while inside the building?
We're going to follow the appropriate phases of
MPA.
MPA. So while we're outside, the first phase, we're going to be training outside. When we're inside, okay, they're going to have 14 feet. And I'm going to reread the guidelines, but I'm pretty sure it's 14 feet. As long as we can maintain 14 feet of distancing, they can be inside without masks.
So are you going to be splitting it up between the amount of students that you have in low power, or are you going to have?
For what, sir?
How is that going to work with the amount of students that you have?
We already have the plan devised to split them, and distance them, and so on.
Okay. Thank
The
you.
program, is the program going to look like what it has for the past 15 years? No. But what we're going to do is a whole lot better than
Bobby?
But we're right now focusing on DOE guidelines. DOE and MPA guidelines are very different in what I've read. So we need to be clear what we're focusing on for our reopening plan for our classes within our school day by law, and what we are focusing on for guidelines that are outside of the normal school day because they're different.
So what just happened there is I speak generally at a 30,000 foot view, which is why some of you have a hard time, because I'm not able to give the level of intimate detail that Mr. Kaplan just gave, because he's in the game. And I apologize for that, but thank you, because just an FYI, that's just a small, he's just one teacher. That's every one of our teachers is doing what he's just did, which is thinking through, how am I going to make this work in my classroom? Okay, thank you, Jeff. That was great. So to answer your question, the MPA is never going to, the MPA falls under DOE. So the MPA guidance that he's speaking about falls under the Department of Education. And the and as Mrs. Bates just pointed out, they're pretty general. And if you read a lot of what she just said, it's inside doing this as feasible. And the as feasible leaves then the room for the MPA to put in a little more stringent guidance around what we can do in music and what we can't, and so forth. So just like with busing, the board got an email from you. There is no specific number of students allowed to ride a bus. The guidance, and I can't say it verbatim, but the most recent guidance as of yesterday on busing, sorry, jumping ahead, Mr. Chairman, is that students, it was the last hard bullet, is filling a bus to maximum capacity can lead to a public health risk and is unadvisable. Well, thank you. We have 77 student passenger buses, and so that means we have to be under 77. We know the governor's order is 50 per space. So if we put numbers on it, we know the maximum number is 50. But they may not be advisable. So that's, again, we're going to get to the hybrid program in a couple hours. We'll get to the hybrid program. But that's what we're working with it. So we have this less stringent guidance up here, and then we have to put some meat to the bone as we're trying to do. And while I'm pontificating, that's why we have to get the kids back. So I see who I have for students in the buildings, and so we have what and I know there's a little bit, but here's the 30,000 foot view. And by the way, we are telling you what we're going to do as specifically as we can. We're going to get them here, and we're going to work through the classes as we said we will, with smaller class sizes, so all the things. And then we're going to go to you in a couple of weeks, board and public, and say, this is what we think is working well and what we don't think is. So, again, my commentary on DOE guidance versus MPA guidance. But I have nothing else on the physical social distancing stuff.
Okay, Ellen, did you have a question?
No, I appreciate it, again, what you're saying, except that I hope we can also think about some things like dance and yoga, which can be done in a distance way. That would help.
If you're talking to me, can you take your mask off? I can't.
Sorry, I'm sorry, thank you.
No, we need questions now.
Later, thank you, I'm done.
Bobby, please.
No, I just had the question of if it was DOE guidance that we were
Okay, thank
following
you.
or MPA. So it was
Heather?
I need clarification on this, and I guess I've been kind of quiet tonight because I'm not all about my community. But we're going by the Department of Education. This is the pre-K adult education public health guidance that you sent us. And on page 13, for physical education activities and dance, it specifically says on the bottom in big print, underlined in bold, these activities cannot occur indoors without a mask. So whose guidelines are we following?
Department of Education.
So under this, there's no way around it. This says all the physical education activities are happening in the building or with a mask. Am I correct?
Yes.
Now, I'm not saying I agree. I'm just asking. Every parent knows that if their kids are going to be safe, they have to have a mask on if they are inside, no matter what.
Okay, may I comment on that? Now I understand the confusion. I didn't understand. There are people in this room who are both teachers and coaches. There is a law, a statute, that while we are functioning in the school day, it's why I don't have to wear a mask tonight, and neither do we, because we're not in a captive audience in the school day, technically, right here tonight. It's an elective for us. It's an option. We're not mandating anyone be here, except for maybe me and the board. But nobody's mandated to be here. After school activities and willpower, for example, any before or after school activities fall outside of the sanctioned compulsory education law, and thus the DOE guidance will be followed during that daytime hour, and then during willpower and after school activities, the MPA guidance will be followed.
Thank you.
Is that clear? Is that clear? I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
That'd be a good thing to write down somewhere.
Any more questions on? Jen? Tracy?
Okay. Masked face coverings. We've got a couple of bullets we added. Pre-K students will be required to wear a mask or face covering when outside of their classroom. Mask breaks will be arranged according to DOE and CDC guidance. Face shields worn in place of face coverings must extend below the chin and back to the ears. This will be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. The most current guidance as of yesterday or Monday was that for behavioral or medical reasons. So we would be requiring documentation as per the DOE guidance that if someone was going to use a face shield, they would have to follow a behavioral or medical reason, and we need documentation for that. Student families who continually choose not to wear a face mask covering need to participate in remote learning. Questions?
Anyone?
Question over here.
I don't have a loud voice, so I'm not
Come to the mic, please.
She doesn't want to.
Going to what you just said about the face shields, and having to have a medical reason to wear it. If it's just as good as a face mask, why can't any child, teacher, whoever, wear a face shield without that?
I have to respond by saying half of what comes out of my mouth, personally, I may or may not agree with, but my answer is, because DOE and the CDC tells us we have. So the answer is, what we require in reference to masks, face shields, or PPE gear when we get to it, is all based on what the Department of Ed says we have. So I might like the idea of giving all of my staff face shields. I might like that idea. And all kids, I might even like that idea. But we have to follow what this is to be able to participate in school.
So how do I contact them?
Email me and I'll get you the information. But again, doctor's notes and other special circumstances will apply with a medical note.
I understand that. One thing I have an issue with is young kids. I took CNA and learned about health risks of wearing masks for long periods of times, and I don't believe that it's safe for my son, who's going to be in preschool, to wear a mask for that many hours a day.
To be clear,
Especially during physical education where you're exercising.
thank you. The preschool students, to be clear, will not be required to wear a
My
mask.
son turns 5 in December.
Okay. Yeah, and I believe the DOE is working on separating, because right now it says age 5 and up. And so because we know we have some kids that have a birthday, pre-K, and kindergarten, we're working with DOE, or at least I got an email out as well on not making an age. In other words, we're stating it's pre-K. So anybody 3, 4, or 5 years old in pre-K would not be required to wear that mask while in class. In the current guidance, what we're stating in our plan is that a student in pre-K will not be required to wear a mask. In class.
There was a gentleman that just hits from us, he had a question?
What type of masks are in the mandate? Is it the N95, just a cloth shield? I mean, they all have different purposes and protect.
No, what the Department of Education is defining as a face mask is a nose and mouth covering. So right now, and I'm not going to get into the efficacy and which one blocks more germs or not, but anything from a scarf that comes up, a bandana, a face mask, a surgical mask, all of those, anything of that sort, the neck gaiter even, those all qualify as face masks.
You guys will be providing that?
We're going to be providing face masks, yes. We only in the event that we have.
With the dog.
Yeah. Yes.
How are you going to get them? I imagine every other school in the country is in the same boat. And they're probably on back order until 2025.
I think we all should go into like making PPE gear. We'd probably be rich. The answer is we've ordered all of those things. I believe we have shipments.
We already have children's masks.
We already have children's masks for the district. Excuse me?
We already have 5,000 children's masks in our possession right now.
5,000, you got 600 something students. That's what, 3 weeks?
Yeah, we have more on, well, I'm hoping that some parents maybe bringing their own, sending children with their own masks. We will be providing masks for students that don't come with masks.
Thank you. Bobby?
Are those disposable or
Yes.
reusable?
No, disposable.
Do we have any reusable?
No.
I've ordered some.
Just to make that clear, what we're supposed to be going by the Department of Education, underneath mask and face covering, number 7, very clearly, mask and face covering should be provided by the student/family, but extra disposable should be provided by us. So, who should be, if we're following the Department of Education, they're saying families should provide.
As we go out and when we get to the hybrid program and what I'm hoping we begin school in the next few weeks under it is, we'll be deploying information out about all of that. And say, it's best case scenario, you know your child best, you know the size they need. It'd be great if you could provide your own. We understand some families won't be able to do that. We're going to talk about the walker. If you live close to school or are able to transport your child, that's best practice under these conditions. We're going to ask that they do that. So there'll be those kinds of informational pieces that we'll be sending out as we get closer.
Maddie?
Yes, can you tell me what the plan is for enforcing that, wearing the mask, because you're going to have children that are defiant and won't. You'll have other children that have a fear. You have other children that really need to be able to see that smile on their teachers' faces, and I mean, sometimes it's how you look, it's not what you say, that I think is important for a lot of these children. So is there, if they're playing with their mask and they're taking it off, for instance, is there going to be some type of reprimand? Are we getting in where you're going to be policing the students and then they're going to be getting detentions and all these other things, or what is that plan?
That's a great question. Thank you. Last week, that was brought up, and what we mentioned, what we're operating with masks and any of this hygienic healthcare kinds of stuff really falls under similarly how we manage immunizations and even lice. And so what that means is we're going to be working with the students and families to help them comply. In other words, if I'm fidgety or it's uncomfortable, I'm like, it's 90 degrees out, can I just please, and our teachers are going to be attentive to that and helping students. And my guess is on the nice days we're going to be like RSU 74 outside teachers. I can imagine a lot of folks are going to want to be outside as much as they can to get the mask raised. When someone is unable to comply, we're going to work with them on that from a health standpoint. If it becomes in a rude tone, no way, Mr. Richards, am I wearing the you-know-what mask, then we creep into maybe some defiance, insubordination and defiance, and then that might become a discipline issue. But we really want to, the notion is, this is why we're front-loading. These are not our requirements. This is what we have to do to go back to school. And we want parents to understand that we don't like it. None of us really like it. There's none of this that I like all of it. But we understand it and we agree to it for the sake of everybody else, community, and getting back into the schools. And by agreeing to that, I'm saying if I'm not able to do the mask thing and that's just too much for me, then I'm going to be moved to remote learning. For us, it's kind of a simple, not a threatening. It's we want you here, we want you to comply with the rules, but if you can't, maybe I'm someone who comes in, I've got my mask on all day, but I'm breaking the social distance thing all day long. And so it could be any one of these requirements that someone's reaching, and we're going to work with them on, but then if they can't comply, then we move to remote learning.
Ellen?
I mentioned before, and I think it's worth saying again, as part of your training with parents, proper mask use and social distancing needs to be part of that. I would spent 7 weeks with a 3-year-old and a 6-year-old this summer, and they wore masks when they had to wear masks, and they understood how to do it, and they didn't complain, but it was part of the program. So I think that's one of the things that's part of the learning, and I think you should put it as part of, this is what we're doing to try to get rid of a pandemic, and everybody has a role to play. So I hope we can make it part of a learning experience.
Fred?
Sorry, I'm coming ahead a little bit. You said outside learning. How's that going to affect the kids sent home with? Or is that going to be different?
No, if I may address that when we get to remote learning, if I don't
Hold
address
that,
it.
can you hold that question, Fred, please, so we can, when it gets there, we'll certainly, if you want to answer it. Seriously.
That's it on face masks, sir.
Okay?
Hand hygiene, there's no change in that section. Question? Personal protective equipment, PPE. Additional, in that first bullet, we've added additional PPE gear such as gloves, disposable gowns, may be needed in specific circumstances. And we talked that through as an admin team. There may be situations where we, to comply with the requirements, and Mrs. Cram and I reviewed a spreadsheet of like, if this circumstance happens, then this is how we respond and what we wear. If this circumstance happens, then this is how we respond and what we wear. So we've been going through that, and she'll deploy that out to her staff. Questions on PPE?
Jen, did you have a question?
No.
No? Okay.
I have a question.
Heather?
Do we have the PPE now?
What PPE gear do we have now?
We have gloves, we have masks, and we're getting our safety.
So we'll be good to go.
We have some goggles in that order, and I have ordered face shields.
But we have enough stuff.
Yeah, we believe we have what we need to start.
Good. Nice to have gals, because on the fire department, if we go over something that over, or inspecting that over, we have to gown up and go in.
There may be occasions with bodily fluids or help cleaning, toileting, and sort of situations that the staff will be trained, and we will have gowns for those situations, yes.
Okay, so I have a question regarding here. So my son has special needs. We have meetings with him all day long. He is physically not able to social distance with her. He's touching her hair, he's holding her hand. Is she going to be required to wear like a full getup all day, like a gown, gloves, a face mask, a face shield? Like how is that going to work?
Mrs. Graham, I don't know if you heard the question.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for students, we'll be meeting with parents and ed techs, and we will be developing plans that best meets the students' needs and keeps everyone safe, because we still have to follow our CDC guidelines, but we also have to make plans to keep kids in school. So that's
Anyone else?
What happens if somebody has a temperature? How do you know if they like have COVID or if it's a regular cold? And what are you gonna do with if that person came on the bus? Do all of those kids have to stay home for 2 weeks?
Thank you for the question. I'm going to address that in returning to school in the very next section. So are there any other questions on PPE, sir?
See none?
Okay, so returning to school after illness, great segue into that last section. There are two components. Students or staff could be symptomatic. That's one thing we would look at. And so what you're talking about is, like my son a few weeks ago, he had a fever, but he had double ear infections. Okay, and we know that that kind of thing is going to happen. So when we have symptomatic situations, we will, if there's a fever or whatever the symptom is, we'd be working with families to get the child home. And then in that circumstance, depending, and I've been asked this question the last couple nights, it's always going to be case by case, because the school nurse is going to be working with that family, with the PCP, to determine is this something that's headed towards a COVID test? And if that's the case, then we're going to be involved in CDC. Or is this something where the child had the fever, they went home, the double ear infections, everybody takes a whew, you know, right? And they become non-symptomatic 24 hours from the symptoms or the fever, and then they can re-enter the school. So that's simple.
Well, what happened to come on the bus, the whole bus, contaminated?
Excuse me?
They come on the bus, somebody has it, that whole bus contaminated, it's all gonna be isolated out.
Correct. So that, I'm going to get to that under pre-presumptive, and presumptive positive cases. Did you have a question on symptoms? Symptoms.
Yeah, I'm just talking about, you said, so the student will go home, with all the parents, whatever. What type of documentation does the school need? I mean, is it okay for the parent to call and be like, hey, it was just an ear infection? Do you need a doctor's note?
Is our school nursing? Lori, can you stand?
So I do have, that I just received tonight, a detailed algorithm that will help us determine what needs to be done with a student with a fever.
Did you have were you able to read that and have a summary of, okay, so.
Yeah. So it's more clinical.
Yeah, please come, yeah, we can't hear you, please come down.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna take off my mask.
Sorry, Lori.
That's all
I
right.
hate to put you on the
So
spot.
literally, I just received this from the state today. So it is our clinical guidelines, and I have mentioned that it is forthcoming. What we do for each, like we follow these steps. So it's really pretty simple to follow.
Yep.
So, so if a student has a fever, first of all, I'm not thinking COVID right away. So they have to have other underlying problems.
So you would be working with that family if they go home to help
Yes.
determine if you're
And I have right up on top tracking, because I'm not on the course
Right.
So I'll have individuals trained in each school to help me with that.
Excuse me, could you speak into the mic, please? We cannot hear you. Thank you.
Sorry. So I will have people trained at each of our school locations that will be following this algorithm, and I will be doing the follow-up with the PC in the beginning.
Wait. So you will be following up with a PCP?
Yes.
Meaning, if a child goes home and has scratchy throat or a fever, they have to follow up with a doctor?
Not in all situations.
Okay, so you are saying that parents can say, my child doesn't have any more symptoms after 24 hours and they can come back. They do
Yes.
not need to medically prove that they had an ear infection or anything else other than COVID.
So, no, they don't.
Okay.
Yeah. So just like business as usual, what we're doing right now for,
Okay.
yeah,
That's for symptoms, that's not
Right.
presumptive positive or out of state.
right, yeah. So that would be a child with just a fever, because it could be flu, it could be a multiple of other things.
But you don't have to prove that it's something else.
No,
Okay.
yeah.
Anyone else have any questions? Thank you.
So in the event of a positive COVID-19 incident among staff or students, RSU 7 will follow all requirements of Maine CDC. And then there are two bullets. Sick staff members and students must use home isolation until they meet the criteria for returning to school. The length of home isolation and criteria for returning to school will be determined by guidelines of the Maine CDC and DOE at the time.
Any questions? Laura?
Something that seems to have been overlooked a little bit from this question about being sick on the bus. We are not quarantining a whole bus just because the child has a fever when they get to school. business will be as usual until something is determined.
Well, no, in case you have to quarantine that bus, because if that kid does have COVID, let the rest of the kids in, now you quarantine the whole school.
That's not what the guidelines are.
Well, that's something you guys gotta think about.
Well, what we would do is if there's a presumptive positive, a positive case, then we would be working with the CDC.
But you don't know that until you have that kid test, but you let the rest of the other 25 kids in off that bus in this building, he tests positive, now you got an epidemic.
You're right.
You gotta quarantine that bus.
If someone's symptomatic, we won't be. If someone's symptomatic, we wouldn't be moving to quarantine or isolation a group or a cohort until the school nurses work with a family and someone does become presumptive positive. Then we're going to be working with CDC on just what you said.
Are there any other questions on?
I have a question about if you have symptoms in a fever, runny nose, headache, sore throat, cough, and you get sent home, does that child stay home until that child has no more symptoms at all?
Yes, 24 hours symptom-free.
So even if they have a cold, they stay home?
Yes.
So that child is going to fall behind?
Hopefully with our remote learning plan, it'll make it easier to keep up at home. That will be the hope.
My question is, how do you protect children who are at the door and have 100.4 temperature, yet isolate them off to the side, and then they're stigmatized in the school? How are you going to protect their privacy? They may not have COVID, they may have a double ear infection, but then everybody in the school is going to be like, stay away from them. How do we protect those children who are just sick that day? Because you're doing it in front of their whole class, everybody. It's not like you're giving them space and privacy. I work for a company. We have a visible, and we have it, when you walk in, only one person at a time, so nobody can hear or see what's happening. Because it's privacy of your medical health at that point.
Yeah, that's a great question. Somebody brought that up to me earlier. We talked about that. My official answer is I'm going to have to get some legal advice on that because there are HIPAA requirements, you're right. And I don't know, I went to the hospital, had blood work a few weeks ago, and I walked through the door, but before I walked through the door, I had to answer the questions, and they blessed my forehead with the temperature, and that was it, right? Everybody saw that, and I could have got turned away had I had a fever or what have you, or answered a question incorrectly. So the hospitals do it, and they're under those same HIPAA guidelines. I don't know, because we're a captive audience in the school and we're mandating people come in based on compulsory education laws, if there's a nuance to that. So I don't know. Ori, do you know? Okay.
I do know, the doctor's first do you want me to come to the front?
Yeah.
So, I greatly appreciate that question, and I've thought about that quite often myself. And it falls under the fact that it's a public health threat. So therefore, the HIPAA guidelines do change, and we can act in what's best for the community in the school. If that.
So it still does not protect that student who
I know.
just has that simple temperature that day.
Right, and that's.
Everybody's going to be
Mm-hmm.
making comments, you know how it is in the schools.
Yes, I do.
These kids are going to be stigmatized.
Yeah. So I opted for no temperature and work with the community and families for that reason right there. But it seems to be not popular.
I mean, you get a cough nowadays, people look at you like you're infected.
It's true. You're right.
We just really need to educate our kids, like we're all in this bullying happens now. That happens already regardless of COVID or whatever. With the medical, you know what I mean? Like, it's already happening. I just think we need to set them up for, we're all gonna kind of have to deal with this. And this person might not be sick. This is what it's gonna look like. We need to like go over this plan with all of our kids and make them more a part of the, I don't know, something to think about.
Thank you. Ma'am?
I think that the whole reason why the CDC at the beginning, or whichever organization it was, said that the symptoms should be checked at home was one of these reasons why. Because they want the parents to make sure the kids aren't going to school sick, and then you don't have to worry about that. If you're not sending your kids to school sick, then you don't have to worry about them getting picked on. So that was one of the reasons why it wasn't said for the schools to take temperatures. It was for the parents to do it at home.
But not all parents do that.
Well, that's why they're supposed to for
They're supposed to, but we don't know that.
Right, so then, to go with what he's saying, if you're doing what we're supposed to be doing, like making sure there's.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, any other questions on this?
This is what it's about.
Obviously, the nurse is going to train the people in our school.
I can't hear you.
I can talk loud. The nurse is going to train the people in our schools that are going to take the temperatures so that we can be as discreet as possible and figure out a way to not have other kids know how someone's temperature came out. We'll be really careful about that. We'll do the very best we can because we respect kids' privacy. So.
Thank you.
So the individual that's going to be taking the test doesn't have to be any type of a nurse or anything like that. They can just be whoever draws the short straw for the day. Okay, and that's kind of a medical thing, ain't it? No, I think they can come to school with us.
Laura?
Even at Reddington Fairview, when you go into the facility for a doctor's appointment, you will work there, you're being tested by someone who is not a nurse or a doctor. The human resources badge is on the woman that took my temperature yesterday. So, if they, I guess I feel very comfortable with it if they do it that way as well, then it should be okay.
Bobby?
We talk presumptive or positive cases and what that looks like.
Well, I just read what it would be, but more specifically, I'll tell you what we're doing now first. I know you like specifics.
I definitely
We would, right now, we're currently operating under a 2-week quarantine and symptom-free, or a negative COVID test.
Okay, what does that look like for the rest of the classroom? If it's positive.
We're going to follow the CDC's guidelines, which I don't know what those are. Unless our school, do you know what the current guidelines are if we have a presumptive positive or positive case in the second grade classroom? Can you answer, Mrs. Harrington?
So this is why we're doing our layering of our 6 protective things that we're doing throughout the school. So that if we have a child that has a fever coming in on the bus, and just say that the child did have or was suspected that it was COVID because they weren't just a fever but had other symptoms that went along with that, and we're thinking, all right, this should be investigated. So that would be a case where the doctor would need to look at the child. So it's not just for a fever, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, my question is, if a child in my daughter's first grade classroom tests positive for COVID, positive case, what happens to these other 12 kids in that classroom? Do they also quarantine or have to test negative?
That would be up to the CDC and the providers.
As of right now, what is it?
So, as of right now, if you had a classroom that had, you would probably you would quarantine, as what my educated guess is going to be. And I'll clarify that because tomorrow I have my nurse meeting, and the next day I meet with the American Academy of Peds. And so
Because it does give guidance for those who come in close contact with a
Right.
positive case.
So we're hoping to avoid a classroom having to be sent home by using all the layers of protective.
Yes, I know we're trying to avoid it,
I know.
but my question is, if there's a positive case.
Right. Yep. Did I answer that?
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we're gonna take a 10-minute break, please. Unless you don't want to. But I'm gonna. Yes.
The RSU 74 soft launch plan through October 8th that was handed out, this form, what plan does this coincide with?
The hybrid, just going to get into it, the hybrid plan.
Okay.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. Tracy?
Yep. I got a code to break.
All right.
Okay. Thank you for asking that question, Mrs. Arrington, because I'm going to start right there. And I think what I'm going to just do is dive right into this, because this is the meat and potatoes, I think, of why everybody's here for the most part. And this is after 7 days feedback. I will talk about the survey and what we've got for results from the family survey. And my administrative team's work on this week's most updated guidance. And it may or may not be the most updated, because I think there may also be an email in my inbox of something that might have come in today. Sort of like our district nurse just received something. So with what we have up to the writing of this document, and the feedback that I've received, we believe the most, and I'm going to use the word comfortable, the term that I think makes the students and families and staff the most comfortable is to soft launch, that's my word, soft launch into the school year, phase in period. So under the hybrid instruction of the remote learning plan, there are a few caveats, but I'm going to start right with this document that I handed out to all of you, and the public, there should have been copies out there. And that is, in short, we're going to propose an every other and shortened day schedule for all students through October 8th. And so for some of you that did like a little more detail, I tried to put in like a skeleton of what that would look like. So what that means is, first of all, and again, this is all in accordance with CDC, like we should try to limit interactions with students, cohort, keeping similar teachers and students together at any given times. That's again, another layer, to speak the district nurse's phrase, another layer of protection. So what we're looking at doing is grouping cohorts by last name or family, so that folks that are familial or are already interacting, maybe without masks at home and so forth, are coming in on same days. So again, what we're going to try to, because we also recognize it's a child care nightmare, we're going to try to, if we've got a family that has a second grader and a seventh grader, line up their Tuesdays and Thursdays or their Wednesdays and Fridays, similarly. That would be the proposal for K-8. We are looking at high school. All of them will have a remote learning period scheduled into their staff's schedule. And what works best for the high school schedule is to do a green and white day. Okay? So that on their schedule, they'd have a 5-day-a-week schedule at 50% capacity. And we began working on this Monday. I'm not sure where the team's at. I know they've been thinking through what the schedules would look like in a little more detail. I don't think we have all the details, but we've been thinking about what this would look like in the schools. So that would be what we're presenting as a hybrid schedule. So part is 50% cohorting. What we think that's going to do is reduce all the numbers down in classrooms, buses, hallways, and spaces to numbers that are well within the guidelines. Okay? I think in many of our schools, as I said last week, we can still achieve the guidelines at a greater capacity, but I think the second thing that it does, and maybe even more importantly, is it gives our staff a chance to re-norm the students. And if I'm interacting as a teacher with 4 kids or 6 kids or 8 kids on any given day in any given class, that's going to be easier for me to be working with them with the mask and the distancing and the requirements as opposed to 17, 18, 19, or even 20 in my classroom. So we think that as we, and I'm just going to say this, as we figure this all out together, because there's a lot of information I don't know. I really don't know, even with a survey with almost 300 respondents, I still don't know what the other 300 kids are going to do. I still don't know that. I really don't know for a fact, how many students are going to be in each classroom. And so because, and how many exactly will choose a remote option. So because of that, for all those reasons, we think an A, B, every other day, 50% capacity cohorts is what we should begin the school year with. The second thing we're saying, and this is to accommodate 2 major things, and I want you to think about this. One is a short day, dismissing at 12:30, pre-K through 12, allows teachers to perform any of their remote learning requirements between, say, 1 and 3. And we weren't, as much as we were trying to schedule that time or maybe provide some extra duty pay, I think staff were really anxious around how we were going to do that within the remote learning, also with the remote learning requirements that our staff will have. So the second thing that this does, and I think, frankly, most importantly, is it decreases the amount of time students with masks on are expected to be wearing a mask during the day. I'll let that sink in a minute. I think if we can go from 7 hours to 4 hours, with the requirements around masks, that stamina that we need to build up for mask wearing, we'll be able to achieve that in the first 30 days or so. So those are where some of those recommendations are coming from. The other piece, again, I think it's going to take all hands on deck. Someone said this earlier. Staff time will be expected to report on their contracted regular hours. The end of that, it says this plan will be revised within the first 30 days, may change based on the CDC MDO guidance, or by executive order within or after the 30 days. As Mr. Dunphy said, I suspect we'll be having special meetings along the way next month or so. I guess I'll start, I think, taking questions.
I'd like to thank you, Mr. Tracy, for coming forward with this plan. I think this makes a lot of sense, and it seems much more doable than what we were thinking about last Wednesday at this time. Thank you.
Ellen?
I was concerned last week about how much was expected of teachers to be doing full-time classroom work and remote work. I think that's really quite challenging. But now we've got something in which the kids, so let's really look at this, if they're going half days, 2 days a week rather than 5, they're only in school for like 30% of the time that they would have been in an ordinary school year, and they haven't been in school since March. So I am very concerned about class learning time. I want them to have time with the masks off. I think we can do that, whether they go more days or more hours. I think every school, you should rent a tent for the first month for every school so they can do things in and out of the school. That's one way of doing that. The other is, I am most concerned about this, where you're using remote stuff for the kids who are from kindergarten through 3rd grade, because their ability to then do stuff at home that makes sense and advances what they need to be doing at that developmental level is very challenging. So I'm not sure that this is the best plan for those learners. And I do want the teachers to have some prep time. I don't know why this needs to be, at least particularly for that group that I'm talking about, needs to be for a whole month, maybe 2 weeks. But I am concerned about us not getting kids into the academic experience that they need to have. And, I don't know what you're going to do, remotely. I know Seesaw, I don't know much about Seesaw. I've tried looking at stuff, I don't know. And how they do that at the early levels and how that becomes a meaningful experience for people who've chosen to do things remotely. But I am very concerned about another reduction in children's experience in the classroom. And I think we should keep in mind that we are very green here. There is very little COVID. And for all of our, it's wonderful. It is wonderful that we're thinking about the protections that are necessary. We should do that. However, the reality is we are fortunate enough to be in an area where there's not a lot of virus. So we are probably protected by that. And I want kids back in classrooms and back learning again. I do want the teachers to be able to manage it, so I would look for, maybe 4 days a week, and give them some time to do that. I would hope they would maybe want to, I've sent several notices, and I actually don't know why you don't know who's coming back. Because even if you did a survey, that's not that, every principal or the transfer chief's got to say, here's the class list from last year, and we haven't heard from these parents. Could somebody give them a call and say, what are your plans? So we have a firmer list for everybody. These seem like things to me that are doable and would give us a better sense of what's going to go on.
Right, thank you. Danica?
First of all, I will respond to the survey. I, for one, have not completed it. I have 3 kids in this, and I don't have enough information as a parent, and I'm unschooled. So none of these people out here have enough information to be making an educated decision as to whether they are remote learning or sending their children back to school. Aside from that, I like the hybrid plan as it's laid out. I do have a concern about the high school not matching the middle school and the elementary. I know that my oldest does watch my children. I feel like we're going to have families where the high schoolers are going to be watching children at home, and if their schedule doesn't match the K-8 schedule, it could create a mess.
I agree with Judy, this hybrid plan is much, it's a lot better laid out than it was last week, and so I'm appreciative of that. I do think that there are concerns around how few hours the kids will be in-person learning, but I think that it's important to remember that we have to offer a remote learning plan. That's one of the guidelines, that we have to offer something remote, meaning our staff has to do equal amounts of that remote learning. And it's not fair to ask them to do full days in person and give the same amount to those roughly 130 students that are going to choose remote learning based on your calculations. So I think that this is probably the only feasible option, and as far as in-person learning. And I have a problem with it only being 30 days because I feel like the kids and staff are going to take some time to get used to that and into a routine on how they're going to do that. And I don't think that it's right to only do it for 30 days. I think that it should be extended longer than that to allow fluidity within the district and to get into a routine. The other question that I have is the in-person learning that we just went over for an hour and a half or whatever. Are we voting on these all separately? Is that option A, voting it up or down, and then the hybrid, voting that up or down, and then the remote, we don't really have are voting that up and down. So this isn't, and then they're all very different. So are we voting on it on each plan as a whole, or are we taking them separately and voting them up and down? And if so, then we need to do the in-person learning, get that.
I think the board can do whatever they want to do. I presented it as a slate, and these are our 3.D plan with these 3 sections in it.
Right, but can you, I mean, if you don't want the in-person, if the board as a whole doesn't want the full in-person plan, 5 days a week, full on, 100% of the kids, if we don't want that at all, but we do want the hybrid plan, then you would have to take them separately. You can't possibly vote on them all at
The
once.
board can approve them however you want to approve them separately altogether. The state has required us to have 3 plans. So we have to have 3 plans to start.
So how would you do that if a parent chooses the 5 days a week in person, you would have to give that to them, even though you're offering a hybrid?
No, we have to have 3 plans in order to, excuse me? No, we have to have an in-person plan, not in person. So the state is currently green, as Mr. Twiston says, as I recommended last week. We're clear to go full in person 100% of the time as long as we can meet the CDC guidelines. So we have a plan for when we're cleared and the community's comfortable to do so.
Right, so what I'm saying is if we approve this tonight, parents have a choice to send their children 5 days a week.
No, because that won't be what the district as a whole. We're saying we have a plan, and then we'll have what we're going to do. We're going to state these are our 3 options because the hope.
But if it's an option, is it an option or is it not an option?
It's a plan for when the district is comfortable, meaning the board, sanctions full in-person learning. You know, a year from now, there's a.
That's what I'm saying is what does our vote yes to this entire plan say are options for parents? Because it's not clear.
Options for parents. You're going to approve a 30,000-foot view plan, a big plan, that has all 3 sections.
Okay.
And then tonight, what we're talking about is specifically the district's going to allow me or not allow me to soft launch under these provisions or provisions like this. And that will be what we deploy out to the public. So we're going to say, we're going to soft launch hybrid with the goal to get back to full in person. So these are the parameters right now of in person under these 6 requirements.
Yes, but that's not in the motion.
I guess I'm misunderstanding.
I'm unclear. The motion is to approve this plan. So if we approve the plan, then you're saying that you have an in-person plan and that's one of the options. If there's only going to be one option, we should only be voting on one option.
So the in-person plan will be available once the board and community says we're going to go back 100% every day, full time. That would be the plan we'd follow at that point. And what the district would be saying tonight is you're going to vote on how we start. And so we're going to fit somewhere within these 3 plans, and that's what this variation of the hybrid plan is. To see if the board will approve the back-to-school plan with edits.
That's it.
The whole, yes, which has 3 sections, in-person, hybrid, and remote. Yes.
I guess I'm missing something.
Okay,
Motion to amend the motion to implement the RSU 74 soft launch plan through October 8th.
Speak up!
Motion to amend the original motion to include RSU number 74 soft launch plan through October 8th.
I don't really know that. I'm not communicating what I need very well, and I'm not entirely sure how to do that.
Can I, hang on, Bobby, so there's 3 options, we're only going to use one of them. Is that?
We have to do 2.
Okay. Remote, yes.
Right.
Yes. So we're only going to choose 2 of them. But there's 3 just for when we do go back to full-time, the plan is already approved.
The Department of Education has required me and my team to put together 3 plans for every local school district. They're called green, yellow, and red. Full in person, full tilt, 100% of the time, to some variation between hybrid and then a remote. And so then those are the 3 plans for, these are what RSU 74 would do under any one of these 3 conditions. And at the same time, we're going to say we're going to start school somewhere in between one of these plans.
So does that need to be a second
It
motion.
doesn't have to be, but it can be if that's the board wants it.
Well, it would need to be so the parents have direction on what we're doing.
What happens after October?
Do we have a second?
What do we second that?
Go.
You can hear us.
Gary, okay, go ahead, Paul, with your motion, please.
To amend it to say that we will implement RSU 74 softball plan through October 8th.
Okay, we have a second, discussion on that.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a comment.
Certainly.
Those on the board who think that the questions that were asked were micromanaging, we don't even know what the heck, what is going on right now, right? And I agree with Bob and Jill. I don't know what the plan definitions are. I realize everybody wants to get out of here, but again, the education of the kids, the safety of the kids, we're responsible for that. So I think questions need to be asked. I think, and again, nagging, I know, but we need indicators to know if we're on track. Is 30 days, what's it gonna look like in 30 days? When somebody comes, when we get input from the community and they say it's a go roping, and when we get input from others that say, oh, it's a wonderful success, we have no method of measuring success or failure. We don't even know what we're voting on. I find that disturbing.
Please. So the Department of Education, I'm smiling at you because I don't think you're that. I think it's a good question. It's getting late.
I thought you were happy to see me.
Oh, I am happy to see you. The Department of Education required our district to approve the 3 plan. And so, if you're asking me, and I'm trying to hear what you're saying, Mrs. Harrington, but I'm trying to understand my miscommunication or our miscommunication. We are required to open school with 3 plans. Because if we say we're only going to open with a hybrid plan, and the governor says the state's red, then we do not have a plan to respond to it.
So we need an operational plan now and a contingency plan if the mandates change.
So if I may, to address, I think, what you're asking, Mrs. Harrington, I think the point you're making, Mr. Dumpy, is, maybe we need to add a motion. Because what I think we need, if you're asking what I think we need to do, I think we need to approve a back-to-school plan with edits. Leave the original motion on the table, please. Talk about it if you don't want to, but leave that there. And then add a motion that the RSU 74 is directing the superintendent to start schools September 1st in the soft launch plan. Meaning you've got 2 plans. You've got the variation with more specificity. We're saying to me, deploy the district in this way under the soft launch guidance, and we can talk about what you want to keep in there if you want to extend it, right? And I think that's going to give me a month to 6 weeks to 2 months, whatever it's going to take for us to figure out how this is going to work. And I'm sorry I'm sounding like I'm sounding, but I'm going to need some time to get the students and the staff in the buildings to determine for you, how it's working and how it isn't. And then I'm going to be able to deliver that information to you. So structurally, if that helps you, the board, I would leave a motion to approve the back-to-school plan with edits on the table, and we can deal with that. But then also add a motion to direct school opening in this fashion. So that way there, we have a plan in the event, because, and maybe I should have said this in the beginning, the governor worked with the CDC on 3 metrics. And everybody knows the 3 metrics, right? Is there a downward trajectory of COVID-19? That's how we know what status we are, green, yellow, or red. It's in the newspaper, so I'm sorry I didn't bring that up in the beginning. A downward trajectory of COVID-19 hospital capacity, and somebody help me. There's a third factor. There are three factors in determining green, yellow, or red. And so the governor's office is going to be working with CDC and the commissioners of each department to determine on a 2-week basis. So in another week, we'll have more information on are we still green. And every 2 weeks, we're going to have that information, that determination based on those factors. So I don't know if that helps address some of what folks are asking. And I'm sorry the clarity that you all, the details you're asking for just aren't there. I mean, I've got a survey with 265 responses, 273 responses, and I handed this to the board. 76% say they're coming back for a version of in-person instruction, 23.8% saying they're going to do remote. That's the data on the table, but I also have parents, and Ms. Davis isn't the only one to say, I don't know how to answer it. I've had parents tell me that last night as well, because of the lack of detail. I understand it, and I'm hearing it. And so that's the conundrum I'm in. And like I said, if folks are grossly uncomfortable, there are districts, RSU 9 just pushed back the start of school to September 8th. I am not advising that whatsoever. But there are districts pushing the start of school off a week or two. If that's what you all are comfortable doing, then I'm going to do what you want. So anyway, that's my response to that. I would recommend 2 motions.
Darren, so there's no way that we all the information that we really want, because it's just not there yet. So we're going to have to make some decisions. We're going to have to move forward. Otherwise, we're going to be sitting in this room indefinitely. But the other thing, we're under 30-day revise. We're going to revise this every 30 days. If something's not working, we're going to throw it. If something's working, absolutely, we'll embrace it. We can fantastic. But it's going to be molding as we move forward, especially depending on if climate changes. So really, I'm going to give you just a little bit of leeway it takes to do your job.
Well, the only response, thank you, Mr. Whitmore, but the only response I have is I'm on a regional superintendent's group. I was in Western Maine this morning. I'm in the Kennebec Valley group every Thursday. And we were going back and forth, and some of the comments were, if we think we don't know things now, and I'm sorry, again, this maybe sound unprofessional even on Channel 11, but the comment back was September 2nd, we're going to really realize what we don't know. And I think we have to move forward with what we know if people are comfortable enough to do so. And then, operate under what we have for current guidance.
Larry.
So what if we vote only on a soft start for 30 days to be reevaluated in 2 weeks? That way we can get the school open, and then progressively look at what a transition looks like if a transition ever happens. I know it's going to be a lot, it's going to be more meetings, it's going to be more work, but we're not sort of committing to everything all at once. Is that doable? To vote on a soft start, to be reevaluated in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever the decision is?
Scott, Mr. Hall, can you peek at the framework? I know that we have to have a board approval, like the remote learning plan has to be board approved before we can start. I know that's a requirement. Can you look and see, I don't want to give the board meeting time to look up. I think the board needs to adopt a plan for reopening, a reopening plan. So I think your idea would probably work.
Because that soft start includes everything we think we need to do with this board.
You need to at least approve the soft launch start, say this is how we're going to do in-person instruction. So technically, in the interim, this would be our in-person and hybrid plan, one and the same. Yep. Based on what you're saying, but we're also going to have you approve the remote learning plan as well. Unless we want to push out the start of the year. So that, I think, I'm gonna have somebody look at the law on that, but I think that would pass a straight face thing.
While he's looking, Mr. Chairman, so how are we going to know if it's a failure or a success moving forward? How are we gonna know if a plan is a good plan, bad plan, indifferent plan, success or failure? No, I'm asking you through the chair.
You'll know when there's an issue for sure, but.
No, I'm not talking operational, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I'm not talking operational stuff. I'm talking how are we going to measure success or failure with academics? How are we going to measure it with safety? Safety should be pretty easy. Nobody gets pulled. How are we going to measure it in terms of cost effectiveness? How are we going to measure it in terms of the ability for the teachers to perform? How are we going to measure it in all of these key indicators?
Well,
They keep using that, but that's
Yeah, no, I mean, you bring up great questions, and I think you need the answers for those. I met with a group on the teacher evaluation system and the tier 3 status of Caravan Community School. If you look at just those benchmarks, for example, whether that's teacher evaluation or the tier 3 status at CCS, there are 3 out of 5 metrics, student achievement, student growth, and attendance, that aren't even factors we can include in. So again, I'm not trying to scapegoat out. I'm just saying that we will be looking at student achievement. We will be looking at teacher effectiveness. We will be looking at
every 2 weeks. We're going to meet every 2 or 3 or 4 weeks. We're not, how are we going
Well, it's not, I wish it was that easy. We're a local control state, so it would be a lot easier if the state said, here's the metrics by which you're going to start, and here's the
But the state isn't, so we need our own metrics, so we need to know if we're failing or if we're succeeding. And if we fumble along every 2 weeks saying, yeah, I think it's getting better, and we don't know that, then we're failing.
And it's gonna have to be gauged sooner than when we think there has a
Yes.
achievement, made achievement. So is there a way that, and this is a concern that the teachers can say, this just isn't working, this, I mean, can you show us the path that if Mr. Eagler or Mr. Terry are doing something and it's not working, but I don't want to say mandated, but this is what they're supposed to do and it just isn't working. What the steps are for, number one, the board, me on the board, I feel after this, everyone else wants to know if it, and I think that part, we do want to know the details. So how do we, is that right, Mr. Larry, that something like that to know? I mean, we don't want to learn 2 years from now that we did a horrible job. We want to know next month what didn't work this month and how we're going to correct that.
So, I guess what a success looks like, what a failure looks like, and what progress looks like.
I guess, and
Go ahead, yeah, we got some more questions. I got you back.
Go ahead.
Okay, Bobby, please.
So we are approving 3 because we need to approve 3 different plans, but we are only offering 2. Clear? We're approving 3 because we need to by mandate. We're only offering 2.
correct.
Thank you.
Okay, Ellen?
Well, it's so hard to do this because, I'm skeptical because I think that last year, the last quarter, did not roll out well. And I don't think that a lot of kids got a lot out of that. So I don't have any basis for thinking, for one thing, I haven't heard anything about how the remote learning is going to be improved over that, given what I've heard. I don't know. I don't know how the systems are better then. I don't know how we're going to do that so that kids are doing this.
I guess,
I guess, can I please
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you
No,
finished.
no, no. So I really wanted to hear, I'd asked last year that we'd have some data on that. About, the responses from students, the kind of, I haven't seen much of them. I also have asked a number of questions such as, knowing that it's not, finished, what do you expect there to be in each classroom, and what is the size of that room, and how does that room measure up? So what can we go if we need to open, if we open full-time and we have the space? I haven't heard about that either. I want to know from teachers how kids from kindergarten through second grade can only be in class 8 hours a week and making progress along the benchmarks for learning to read and write and compute that are necessary. I would like to hear something about, we're going to do more remote learning than ever before, and we've got problems, there are constraints on that. Part of it that we can't, that are difficult because of where Maine is, the kind of infrastructure we have. How do we overcome that? What do we need? I've asked for how do we get more bandwidth, for one thing. I'd like, what about some things like, do we need to hire personnel that have expertise in these areas that could improve things, such as a remote learning specialist? I'm not just talking about another technique, as wonderful as they all are, because what would we do? Nothing. But I'm talking about people who are into, about children's learning and then how you facilitate that with technology. So I would like to, I would feel better if I felt that I was hearing from you that you thought about these things after a semester, a quarter, in which, things went really awry. What were the things that teachers, administrators felt they needed, and how do we put that into practice? Because we might have to go remote at any moment. And it's more likely that we won't have to go to remote in the first 30 days, but probably from 60 to 90 days out. So that's where I'm confused, because I don't see how this plan works for kids.
Thank you. Judy?
I agree we do need feedback to be able to do this plan and adjust as necessary. But I think it's unrealistic for a board that looks at our academic progress one night a year, that we're suddenly going to think that we're going to be able to see changes every 2 weeks and know if we're making adequate progress, whatever that may look like, when we can't even know what adequate progress looks like because the tests keep changing every 2 years, and so now the data that we had gets thrown out and everything gets realigned. So to think that we're going to be able to get feedback every 2 weeks to know if this plan is going to be effective or not, I think is unrealistic. We are not pre-COVID anymore. This is the situation we're dealing with. We've got to do the best that we can. Get the kids back to school, only at school half time. It's going to take longer to meet those benchmarks. Absolutely. That doesn't take a rocket science to figure that out. So let's go ahead, get everyone back in school as best we can for now. Look at things in a month. See what we have from feedback from teachers, from parents, from students. Because people are going to be paying attention and they're going to be noticing what's happening. Let's look at that feedback, then we can make adjustments. And we think that right now we're going to have that plan when all this has been worked on, probably isn't realistic. And that's unfortunate, but that's just the way it is. So let's move on and let's keep going and getting something adopted.
Okay, thank you. Eva?
I just wanted to say that, one, the pandemic, one year spent with the third. So it's kind of a fresh thing that we're all going through here. None of us, I said, this is a pandemic. We've never gone through it before. So first of all, we'll kind of check ourselves in our mind and remember that this is new to every one of us. So, yes, some may have extra questions, some might like more details. I'm a black and white person. I don't like anything in the gray. I'm double checking myself all the time. I've hit my tongue a bunch of times and I'm glad I did. But am I right to assume that the framework for returning to classroom instruction is something that our staff is utilizing? That if you send it to us, that you're using the framework here, the working draft, and the Maine Department of Education. Just
that is what we wrote this plan on.
So in that, it states very clearly, and it was sent to all of us on the board, it states very clearly that they're going to be needed to study and monitor progress in communication with teachers and parents and administrators about decisions regarding learning loss and recovery education. That will be provided. So it states in here that they already know that we need to create things, ways to judge and see what's going on with our students and the education and staff. So they'll come up with it as it comes. I just think that we're nitpicking a little bit too much here. A little bit.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
We have, speaking of chairs, folks, if you can't hear, I'd invite you to come in to other chairs closer. There's more spread out if you'd like to. Just want to let you know that you're in the back. You couldn't hear me. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Do we have a motion on the floor?
Yes.
We actually have two motions on the floor.
You can't.
We have,
You can't do it.
point of order then, sir. We have the original motion, which is to see if the board will approve the back-to-school plan with edits. And then I think Mrs. Herring did, no, Bob made a motion, excuse me, Mr. Nepchak made a motion to amend the motion to see if the board will approve the soft launch plan through October 8th.
So we have
an amended motion.
We don't have two votes.
Yeah, excuse me. We have an amended motion.
I'd like to move the motion.
Okay, seconded. All in favor of moving the motion? What?
There's only one motion on the
There's
floor.
only one motion on the floor. It's the motion to amend. All opposed?
Who seconded it? I'm sorry. Vote on the motion.
Now we're going to vote on the motion to amend.
Yes.
All in favor for the motion amended? Yeah, please, okay, thank you. Okay.
We are voting as to whether to amend the motion to state, to see if the board will approve the soft launch plan through October 8th. Would you like me to tell you procedurally what you can do with this, so you understand what you're voting? Okay, you can do this, but we will also have to add a motion to approve the remote learning plan as well. I can make you do two votes. I'll have to do the separate vote, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay? Just want to let everyone know. Yeah.
All in favor? Anyone opposed? Anybody abstain?
We just voted, motion on the amendment, okay?
Now, so clarification.
The motion is to see if the board will approve the soft launch plan through October 8th.
All in favor? Anyone opposed?
I'm gonna have to do a count. I'm sorry, can we do approve? Approve one more time, I'm sorry.
Approve, please. Bob, approve. And, opposed? Thank you.
Mrs. Tracy, what was the count on that?
Okay, we have,
I got 9-5.
it has been seconded. Any discussion?
Would you like me to present any updates on the remote learning plan, sir? Okay. Just a couple. As presented last week, the last section of the big overall back-to-school plan, we struck a phrase in the beginning that was not needed. We updated item 11, which would include school meal provided to students at their homes or a location distribution hub. A remote, and then that's 11. 12 is the remote learning policy to be generated by the school district for parents and guardians. Students can transition from in-person instruction to remote learning at any point in time. However, a student may transition from remote learning to in-person learning only on the first of each month. This allows the district sufficient time to plan transportation and physical distancing issues. Exceptions to this may be made at the discretion of the building principal. Students can opt in or out of remote learning during the first 2 weeks of school. We put that in as sort of a standard. 4 weeks, I'm sorry. We put that in as kind of a generic standard. I have already made the statement at a couple of parent meetings that while we're figuring this out in the first 30 days, there will be flexibility in the event that families needed to move in or out. We'll work the best we possibly can to accommodate those transitions. That is the update, sir. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. The communication section says parents can reach out to the child's school with any questions. We added that to the communication section.
Question? Annika?
With the remote learning plan, because we're going to have this and things will be seamless and we can transition at any time, I'm going to assume that there will be snow days this year? Okay. Staff workshop days, so those are going to take place on the Mondays. Well, I guess it's really down.
Those would be considered. That's a great question. So if I may just, there are 175 student days. We have 182 contracted teacher days. So those are, you've already approved, the board's already approved the school calendar. And so that is the operational calendar. And so any day that we're not in person, that's a scheduled school day, so that it can be a remote learning. And currently, at this current hybrid plan, Mondays will be a remote learning day.
Ellen?
Well, I certainly hope that we're working on upgrading the remote learning pieces. One of the things that was said by parents at one of the schools yesterday was a very heartfelt remark about children's mental health, given all of this is going on. That they need more, and they need attention, they need connections. One thing that has occurred, and we talked about Zoom and other things at the last meeting. One thing that can be done is to have Zoom groups such that you could have morning meeting with a group of kids who are at home. And if you're in schools, one part of the mental health part of the regular school day is that part in the classroom with the teacher running that circle time morning meeting. The kids come in and they talk about, they've got show and tell and other kinds of things of what's going on. You can do that remotely. Now, one of the things that happened last year was that, everything has to be the same. It's not equitable if somebody gets one thing and somebody doesn't. We've got to get over the idea that fair and equitable and sane are equivalent. What you have to do is do what you can, the best thing that reaches the most kids, and for those who aren't, we can find another way to reach them. And I think we need to think about that all the time, and not say we don't do anything if we can't do it for all of the kids, because that doesn't help anybody learn. So as we go through this, I want to hear more about what has worked. Teachers would know better than I. I want to know what they need in order to, most of them didn't come in thinking they were going to be doing remote teaching. So what do they know, what do they need to know? Because I think teachers want to do well in the classroom. What do they need in order to advance the instruction that they're going to have in their connections with kids? And I would like us to think about the mental health aspects of kids being in different situations.
All right, thank you. Bobby?
Is there an option in the remote plan that if a student needs physical contact with the teacher during that time frame of 1 to 3 in the afternoon, that they have the option of the parent bringing them in to meet with the teacher?
So one of the things we didn't talk about is that as part of remote learning, we will have students, and it's in there in one of the members, that, and this is what Kristen brought up, a very good point about social emotional needs. But beyond that, there may be 504 or IEP needs. There may be Title I needs. There may be other supports. Or maybe just, I need access to the teacher type. And I think that schools will be working individually with those families to accommodate them. So we may have, and Mr. Richards and I talked about this morning, we have 24, 28 CTE, SCTC, career technical school kids going to Skowhegan. And so those specific kids might actually have to come in on an everyday basis. Or they may go to SCTC one day and then Fairbank High School the next. That's a special circumstance we're going to have to work around. And so, to answer your question specifically, we're trying to address both mental health and special circumstances where we may have to work with, the schools are going to be open to address a major difference that you pointed out was between what I call crisis learning from the spring to actual remote learning this fall. One is the schools are actually open. We don't have a situation where the governor is saying we got to close school facilities. The schools are open so those agencies can get kids in. So the short answer is yes. How that will occur, I don't have the details, but I know that my staff and team is talking about making special accommodations for special populations.
Another question. Our next policy committee meeting, where we'll have to address all of these policies that need to be in place, when is that? And when is our next board meeting? Not our regularly scheduled board meeting, the next anticipated board meeting.
You got that, Jude, right there?
September 23rd.
September 23rd is the policy meeting.
Are we moving that?
Can I had, I'm going to operate under this being the policy. I mentioned that last week. I don't have any of the policies ready.
Okay.
And I'm hoping we get a draft policy from our legal firm on, remote learning.
Our next regular
23rd.
board meeting will be
September 2nd. September 2nd.
September 2nd.
Bob?
Would it be possible September 2nd to get a demonstration of what this looks like? So we can see it?
The remote learning cookies?
Yeah, that's good.
Yes, I think we can. Yeah, I mean, you go ahead.
Would anyone, I may feel that while we're just getting going, if we had a special board meeting maybe a couple weeks after our regular meeting,
September 16th.
like September 16th, if that would be fine with everyone, 'cause I'd like to stay on top of this.
We don't even need a vote. We can just call a special board meeting.
Okay, so
If everybody's looking at, how's that?
everybody good with that? I guess I want to, okay. September 16th, 6 p.m. here at the high school.
I can cover a few facets of remote learning. This is because you asked a lot of questions in some of your statements, so I'll do the best I can to address them. Our plan from here, that's probably what a lot of folks are asking. We did, going back to the summer, we did launch a survey on how crisis learning worked, and I had not gone that forward to the board because we vetted it as an administrative team, and much of what we felt went awry are things we're addressing in the new remote learning plan. So the things that sort of, we've got this notion of maybe some folks feeling like we're going to hodgepodge into the school year. I don't think that's the case. With remote learning, we're saying, and I'll just give you some caveats that I've been sharing with parents, because what I've done is I've lumped the, I'm sorry, those of you that were at parent meetings last night, I've lumped the 12 state common expectations for remote learning into really 4 categories. One is schedule and curriculum, meaning in the spring, we did learning packets. Remember that? And they were kind of been tied to the curriculum, but they were not, there was not a daily accountability, and there wasn't a daily schedule. We know that went awry, and we're going, and the state knows that, and we're going to try to fix that. So the schedule and the curriculum are going to be aligned to RSU 74 school day at the grade level and based on our RSU 74 learning results and standards. The second category is a daily check-in. So attendance. Remember we said to be equal and fair, we can't hold people accountable, there won't be a daily check-in. There was no accountability because we weren't grading as well. So with this new model, we're saying there's a specific attendance accountability. The teachers who are going to assign those 3 remote learning students who are also in their class, they're just learning at home, there's going to be a daily accounting because that teacher has to certify 175 school days for that kid, that child. That's the attendance portion. That's an upgrade over what we did wrong in the spring. Materials and the teacher. The direct access. The schools will be open. The schools were closed in the spring. We told teachers, you can't come into the building because that was the mandate we were operating in. That won't be the case. So we'll have RSU 74 staff, materials, equipment, students accessible to those remote learning campus, equal to their counterparts who are in school. And the last thing, and we asked for it, we said this is something we didn't do right. I'm admitting this, is that statewide, for the most part, we did it this way, was we didn't grade. There was no testing or grading. So now we're going to grade and hold students accountable to the achievement that we're saying we need to learn online. So there's grading and testing, that level of accountability. I just learned today that we'll be able to deploy the NWEA tests globally out to homes. So students that have laptops, which we'll also be able to provide in the homes for remote learning, hopefully with access. We'll be able to take those equitable assessments at home. Part of, I think, what you asked was, how will we upgrade our remote learning? I know Mr. Hall has ordered 40 more hotspots, and how many more laptops for K2?
I haven't ordered the K2 laptops yet because China distribution has been halted due to the conditions on Kansas. However, if I can get the laptops I ordered in May in by the end of September, then I can use the laptops that we had last year for students to fill that gap.
Okay, so we hope in the next couple of weeks that we will have, hopefully, enough resources based on what we purchased in May, that we're finally getting that shipment in to upgrade the district, that we hope will have older machines, I guess, used machines that we deploy out to the rest of the district. So the hope is to be, as soon as possible, one-to-one with laptops K through 12. So that's something we're doing. Once we have a plan, and I hope we're getting closer to a plan, the very next thing we'll be doing is deploying information out to staff. I have a staff meeting, a Zoom with staff next week. I'm also going to do a community Zoom. People who can't come to the in-person meetings this week, I'm going to do that next week. And we are going to begin training staff and families on these new protocols. And so that is the plan in the next 2 weeks. And hopefully increase the equipment capable capacity at the same time. So that's, I think, I don't know if I answered all the questions.
Larry, is Seesaw up and running?
Seesaw is up and running.
The most advanced one, the people have trained in.
We are in the process of training people on Seesaw. Brian's not here.
The 18th.
Mr. Butler, next week, the 18th?
Yeah.
We're starting our first.
Is the most advanced? Is the most advanced?
It's the premium edition.
The premium edition, is that premium edition, it's ready?
I just got the synchronized working with Synergy in it today. So all the classes are there, and so it should be a nightly update from here on out for teachers not having to worry about like rosters and things like that.
So it is installed and operational?
It's web-based, so it's just going through the web.
Web-based. So it's
Not installed.
Okay, well, it's operational.
Yes.
Good. How long is that thing?
How long has it been operational? How long has the new premium edition been operational?
I purchased it about a month ago, and it was accessible, but now it's at a point where it's getting regular updates from our student information system on a nightly basis.
Thank you.
Fred, you had a question? Okay, Bobby?
At the start of school, September 2nd, for remote learners, we don't have a one-to-one laptop. Will we be doing packets?
Yes.
Ellen?
In terms of the attendance, so they're going to be check-in, is there a protocol for teachers checking in with the students? Or
Well,
they're
like
going to, I mean, it's not like, they're going to call and say, hey, did you do your work today? And they're going to say, yup. Or are they going to be, is there going to be a sort of guideline for what the teachers are going to be addressing with the students?
Yes, ma'am. Want to make sure you're
Well,
finished.
then I've got a second question at the end.
Can I try to answer that first?
Sure.
You give me two or more, and
I me too. Okay, good.
Okay, number 5 on the remote learning plan is the remote learning attendance will be certified in one of the following criteria is met by 3 p.m. 1, the teacher certified participation in that day's lessons, which would be participation in Seesaw or the Google Classroom formats that we're using. The teachers can see that access. There's like date and time stamp of the student accessing that information. That would be a verifiable way of attendance that day. Students completing the day's independent work or direct contact to the teacher via email, SMS, phone call. And I had the question if someone's choosing remote learning and mom and dad work throughout the day and they're really going to be working with the child from 6 to 8 in the evening, can I make contact to my teacher at 8 in the evening with an email back or an SMS message, like remind an app, or remind.com or something at 8 p.m. That's going to be done on a case-by-case basis with the building administrator and the teacher. So that we need to have levels of assurance so that the teacher then can verify attendance for that student. So does that answer your attendance question?
My second question is really quick. So given that there's so many changes in the academic delivery, should the academic committee perhaps be meeting before October 14th? So maybe get updates on some of this so that we can actually save time at the meetings, maybe by having
That's a great idea. We certainly can call a meeting and yes. Thank you.
Great.
I just wanted to know, I didn't hear, how many computers did you say you
How many, Scott, Mr. Hall, could you come on here, please?
Can't hide in the dark hole anymore?
Can you let folks know how many computers you've got ordered, sort of like?
So back in May, I knew that the computers we had now for the one-to-one in the classrooms for 4 through 12 were starting to run down. So I ordered enough for one-to-one for the 4th through 5th grade, enough for every teacher to have a brand new Chromebook with touchscreen smart pen capabilities, and enough for the ed techs to also be upgraded. And that ended up being about 600 devices. I'll be getting my first shipment of 40 into Friday. So it's circumstances beyond all the companies. There's an embargo in China with the electronic goods that are just halting everything right now. And this is the thing that keeps me up at night, in all honesty, because unfortunately there's nothing we can do. There's no stock in any warehouses in the U.S. that I can find. So.
You probably answered already, but so if the child is on the AV schedule and it's their day of the week, they have at-home learning, remote learning. They need to have that done by a certain time, correct?
So,
Kind of stay on schedule.
Again, I'm sorry I don't have the details specific to that. What I understand that we're talking about doing, what address?
Well, I may want one of the teachers to actually address this. In that case, I don't see that any different than I would a normal classroom? Because I hate to say it, but we do have some kids who, you give them the work, they don't do it in class, you give them the work, they don't do the homework. It's similar scenarios. Well, in this case, the communication has to be a lot more clear because you can't just take the kid aside and talk to them kind of thing. So, although it's a different methodology of how to do it, it's really no different than a typical in-classroom discrepancy with the student not doing the work they're supposed to be doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm just thinking.
And that's where part of, that's part of the attendance piece will come into it as well. Because the thing you have to remember is attendance and grading are two separate things. Sometimes they blur together depending on participation and things like that. But participate. If you have a student who does all the work, and never checks in, they're going to have maybe some good grades, but terrible attendance. So it's a case by case, and that's where I think the teachers and the daily check-ins are really going to be helpful.
Thank you. Heather?
I had a mom ask me earlier if you could masking, if you can, provide a day in the life of like my fifth grade, so that they can look at it as what a day would look like if you were remote, or what a day would look like, or maybe a week. But I don't want to make it too elaborate, but I had a mom quickly ask me if that was possible for us to put out to parents.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have it filled out for me. So it was
No.
like, she said, looking at that would give her an idea of what she wants to choose from her fifth grade.
Are you asking for similar of a response tonight, or because my admin team, in the hopes that we get a plan tonight, we're meeting tomorrow. And as I talked about before, we're going to start to, and I think our very next thing is going to be looking at that, and getting what do we need to get out of the staff, because we're talking about the trainings in the next 2 weeks, and so yes, and part of the training to parents will be what this looks like. No, it's a great question. And yes, we plan to do that on the day.
Danica?
Just piggybacking off what Heather said, within the first 30 days, we kind of had that ad drop, whenever you can come in and try it out, it's not working, you can go remote. Is there any way that we could do like almost an orientation? Like your kindergartners that are coming in, they come in prior to this is your classroom, this is your teacher, this is your stuff, that type of thing, but on like a bigger scale, so the kids know, like, this is what your setup is going to be, like, this is what your day is going to be.
Yes, my answer is yes. I don't know if the teachers are going to want to do that once they're sort of trained on what is their new classroom look like, and is the fourth grade teacher at Harris Game going to want to sort of do that orientation with each of her own families? Or so I know I'm going to be doing sort of I hope to put fears down with the folks over the next week with the parent meetings, with the Zoom parent meetings, and with the staff. But sort of the next phase is working. I think the teachers are still working on what is the day in the life in my classroom even look like. And then once they know, then they can help me. Because I can't answer all these questions, but they're going to be able to work with families. This is what it's going to look like. You do remote learning with Dave, this is what it's going to look like in school.
Right. I fear that a lot of people are they're going to choose the remote learning option because of the unknowns. Right. Because they don't know what the day is going to look like for their kids, they don't know how they're going to react to being in a mask for the 4 hours a day that they're going to be in a mask. There's a lot of unknowns, and I feel like we'll lose some children and some families to the remote learning option. It may ultimately come.
Ellen?
Oh, well, it's wonderful. I'm piggybacking on both of you because I remember back when my kids entered kindergarten, they got this lovely letter from the kindergarten teacher welcoming them to the school and saying, here's what kindergarten's going to be like. All of these kids being out of school for so long. I think that kind of welcome letter from every teacher might be very nice. So I'm so looking forward. Whether you're going to do it remotely or whether it's going to be something, here's what I'm looking forward to this year. We're going to study these things, and we're going to start off, and we're going to, we're going to be, something like that is going to be very helpful for the students and the parents to get kids back into, boy, it's exciting to go to school. So,
Bobby?
When will parents know if their child is A or B days? And when do they have to commit so that you can, if they're committing to remote learning, do they have to have that information to you by a certain time so that you don't put them into the AD?
Those are great questions. So I really, again, feel like my role, I always talk to the teachers about running bureaucratic interference with the state. I feel like my role with parents is to say, I know you want me to know everything, but this is what my big school's gonna look like. I know I keep saying this. And I will answer your question directly.
Yeah, because daycares, work schedules, those are pretty important things for parents to figure out.
To answer your question specifically, we're going to let folks add drop in the month of December, in and out, because I agree with some things that's going to happen. My team's already working on those cohorts, and we're already running these things today, because we're looking at family units and friendships at the high school and and then trying to make it all work. And then once we have that information, again, I said we're meeting tomorrow, we'll be deploying that out at our earliest, once we know what we're doing. We'll get those cohorts set up. I know Winslow just posted theirs this morning, and their board just recently approved their very similar plans. There was a teacher that was going to respond to something.
I just wanted to address that we do send out welcome letters. We have sent out our welcome letters, but, you know, again, we can only give them as much information as we have. So I couldn't tell them, you know, we're going to do this project and this project because I don't know that information. So now that I know a little bit more what the day is going to look like, I can give them a little bit more specific information. But we do send out welcome letters and, you know, touch base with them. And, yeah.
Question has been moved. We have a second. Seconded. All in favor of moving the question?
Are you moving the question? Okay.
Opposed? Thank you. Okay.
So there's the motion on the table, sir?
Please.
Is to approve the remote learning plan. It's first by Mr. Temchak, second by Mr. Whitmore, and that's the motion on the table.
Okay. All in favor of the motion as read? Anyone opposed? Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.